A 13-year-old boy throws dirt into another kid's eyes mid-duel at a royal banquet, and nobody stops him. A loyal soldier gets turned into a walking corpse and drives a sword through the one person he swore to protect. A princess smiles sweetly at the man she's already decided to destroy, and he has absolutely no idea, until the kingdom is ash and all that's left of her is a one-word note. And a mysterious swordsman from across the ocean steps onto a blood-soaked battlefield, grabs a boss-level orc commander by the horn of his helmet, and takes his head off like it's nothing. Like the terrifying warlord who survived every strike the entire allied army threw at him is just a minor inconvenience. One moment. That's all it takes. Wait, how did we get here? Rewind. All the way back. His name is Yuri Bole, third prince of the kingdom of Betrayal. And the last time we saw him, he was 28 years old, bleeding out in the ruins of everything he loved, watching the face of the man who once called him my prince go completely empty, because that man was already dead, puppeted by the Empire to finish the job. His name was Lauren, a good soldier, a loyal one. And Yuri didn't even fight back. That's who Yuri Bole was, a man who watched his father disappear, watched his kingdom burn, watched Emma, his maid, his first memory of kindness, get cut down, all because he had been lazy, reckless, in love with a woman who was feeding every secret he told her straight to the enemy. He dies on the floor with Lauren's sword in his chest, and then he wakes up, age 13, his childhood bedroom, sunlight through the curtains. His body is small and weak and completely wrong, but the mind inside it has 20 years of blood and grief packed into every corner. He sits up, and through the doorway he sees his father, King Fiore, the man who vanished in the original timeline, one of the 10 strongest warriors on the entire continent, standing there, very much alive. And Emma, his maid, alive. Yuri's first thought, in that exact moment, is that he's in hell. He breaks down crying. Because what else do you do when the people you failed to save are standing right in front of you, completely unbothered, offering you breakfast? Then it clicks. He's not in hell, he's been given a second chance. And Yuri Bole, lazy, gambling-addicted, love-struck mess of a man, dies in that moment too. What picks itself up off the floor is something else entirely. He immediately requests rigorous training from his instructor, the Sword Demon. Not politely, urgently. The Sword Demon almost drops his tea. This is the same kid who used to pay older students to write his training reports. But Yuri knows exactly what's coming, and he has maybe 5 years before the first dominoes start falling. The Sword Demon agrees, and Yuri spends the next stretch of his second childhood getting absolutely destroyed on a daily basis and loving it. But training isn't enough, because the first fire he has to put out isn't the Empire. It's sitting right across from him at a royal banquet 3 weeks later. Got Barber, Count Jonas's son, polished, arrogant, good-looking in that way that makes people assume he's good-natured. He isn't. In the original timeline, Got Barber, drowning in debt, terrified of his father's expectations, sold royal military secrets to the Empire, and literally opened the kingdom's gates for the invasion force. Betrayal didn't fall because of Trina alone. Got handed them the key. Yuri looks across the banquet table at this kid who doesn't know any of that yet, who hasn't made any of those choices yet, and he has a decision to make. Kill the future or redirect it? He challenges Got to a duel, right there, at the banquet. The adults are horrified. 2 children, drawing swords in a dining hall. Got accepts because he's young and proud and he genuinely thinks he's the better swordsman. He's right, technically. In terms of pure current skill, Got is better. Yuri doesn't care. He's not here to win on points. The duel starts. Got is quick, clean, textbook. He comes in with a sharp overhead strike, and Yuri steps aside, grabs a fistful of dirt from the garden planter near the wall, and throws it directly in Got's eyes. Got staggers. Yuri kicks him in the chest, puts him flat on his back, and stands over him with a blade at his throat. Silence in the banquet hall. Count Jonas looks like he's about to have a medical event. Yuri reaches down and pulls Got to his feet. Quietly, so only Got can hear, he tells him, "Your path ends in disgrace. I'm offering you a different one." Got doesn't understand. He's furious and humiliated and confused. But Yuri plants the seed. And that's all he needs for now. Because Yuri isn't just playing chess with people, he's playing chess with time. Every choice he makes in this new life is a move against the version of history that already destroyed him. Next on the board, Jared. Jared is a knight candidate at the Royal Academy. Enormous raw talent, monstrous physical potential. He is, by every measurable metric, a prodigy. He is also completely aggressively lazy. He sleeps through drills, skips assessments, does the bare minimum to avoid being expelled, and spends the rest of his time looking bored. In the original timeline, he eventually woke up, too late to matter. Yuri walks into the academy and finds him slouched against a wall watching other students train, looking deeply unimpressed. Yuri sits down next to him and starts talking, calmly, precisely, about what Jared's talent could actually become, about what's coming for this kingdom, about what it means to have that kind of ability and just let it rot. Jared tells him to get lost. Yuri provokes him instead. Specifically, carefully, surgically, until Jared's pride kicks in, and he channels mana without thinking about it. The air changes, every other student in the yard stops what they're doing. The instructor's jaw drops. The output is enormous. Jared looks down at his own hand like he's seeing it for the first time, and Yuri smiles. That, Yuri says, is why I'm here. He doesn't recruit Jared with a speech or a contract. He recruits him by showing Jared a version of himself Jared didn't know existed. And Jared, too proud to pretend he isn't curious now, follows. But the clock on Yuri's preparation is ticking, because Sword Mountain is the real prize. Here's the situation. Somewhere beneath Sword Mountain is a hidden palace, a secret chamber built by Yuri Bole, the founder of betrayal, containing his personal legacy, his techniques, his tools, his mana method, which the court mage Hernando later tells Yuri is something completely unlike any standard cultivation path. It operates on intuition, on flow, like a living thing. In the original timeline, the Empire found it first, used it against betrayal. In this timeline, Yuri knows it's there. So he goes and gets it. He takes Jared and Hernando, the court's grand sorcerer, a man with fate-revealing magic and a tendency to gamble at the worst possible times, who Yuri has quietly been building a relationship with. The three of them slip into a secret palace passage and descend into the mountain. What they find down there is not a comfortable treasure room. First, there's the Death Knight, a guardian construct made of old mana, built to test intruders. It doesn't fight like a person, it fights like a wall that decided to get aggressive. Yuri goes in alone while Hernando and Jared hold back, and he doesn't win cleanly. He gets hit, hard, multiple times. He survives on instinct, on the compressed experience of 20 years of mercenary combat, stuffed into a body that hasn't finished growing. He makes it through. The second gate is a faceless mana puppet, a construct that mirrors your own fighting style back at you, adapts, learns. It's specifically designed to defeat the clever, and Yuri, fighting on instinct and a 13-year-old stamina, has to get creative. He doesn't overpower it, he outpaces it. He forces it to react faster than its adaptation can process, and he finds the gap. And then, past both gates, in the deepest chamber of that mountain, a sword called Guilty. And the technique bound to it. Soul separation, this is the crown jewel. The founder's secret. A mana method that doesn't follow rules or forms. It flows through the user's intuition, sharpening perception to something almost supernatural. Not quite a sixth sense. More like the world around you goes slightly slower, and your body already knows where to be before your mind finishes thinking. It can infuse mana into objects. It produces, eventually, something called the soul cut, which isn't a sword skill so much as a direct extension of will through a blade. Yuri picks up Guilty, and the technique flows into him like water finding a crack in stone, like it was waiting. He comes back out of that mountain changed. Not dramatically. His body is still 13, still limited, still exhausted. But the foundation he just laid is the foundation the entire rest of this story is built on. And the moment he surfaces, the political games kick back in. Hernando pulls Yuri aside not long after the mountain. His expression is unreadable, which for a man who usually looks like he's calculating 17 things at once, is unnerving. He tells Yuri he has a secret, fate-revealing magic. A rare, almost mythological ability. Most grand sorcerers spend entire careers chasing theories about it. Hernando actually has it, and he used it on Yuri. The result terrified him. Most people have fates, fixed trajectories, probability lines that bend toward certain outcomes no matter what choices they make. Hernando can read them like a map, but Yuri's fate is blank, completely unmapped. Not because he has no future, but because whatever he is, whatever happened to him, he exists outside the lines entirely. He defies destiny in a way Hernando's magic simply cannot process. Hernando doesn't ask how. He's too smart for that. He just looks at this 13-year-old boy with the eyes of a battlefield general and quietly decides that whatever Yuri Bole is building, Hernando is going to be part of it. That's the alliance sealed. No contracts, no ceremony. Just a very old mage deciding that the most interesting man on the continent is currently in a child's body and probably needs help with the paperwork. But before Yuri can breathe, the Senate comes for him. The political structure of Betrayal runs partly through a council of dukes, men who've spent decades cultivating influence at court and zero time on an actual battlefield. When word spreads that the third prince has been using an unsanctioned mana method, specifically the founder's soul separation, which isn't in any official curriculum, two of them move to have it banned. Strip it from him officially, make it illegal for him to practice. On paper, it's about regulation. In reality, it's about power. A prince who can't cultivate freely is a prince who depends on the court's approval for everything. They table the motion at a formal political session. Yuri and Hernando attend. What happens next is not a screaming match. Yuri doesn't lose his temper. He doesn't threaten anyone. He and Hernando dismantle the Duke's argument piece by piece, using legal precedent and military history, walking the council through every clause those men have apparently never actually read in the law they're citing. And then, the killing blow, Yuri asks, very politely, for the Dukes to describe their own personal battlefield experience in any capacity, and waits. Silence. A very long, very uncomfortable silence. The motion dies. The Dukes sit back down, and Yuri walks out of that session with his mana method fully intact and two powerful enemies who are now also slightly afraid of him. He'll deal with them later. Right now, there's a more pressing problem coming through the front gates. The Imperial Embassy arrives. Prince Jorge and Princess Trina. A diplomatic visit, all pleasantries and court procedure on the surface, all calculated pressure underneath. Jorge is the Empire's second prince. Tall, immaculate. The kind of man who treats cruelty as an art form. He walks into Betrayal's court like he owns it already, because in his head, he does. He knows his empire is going to swallow this kingdom. He's here to evaluate how long it'll take. And Trina. Yuri sees her and something in his chest goes very still. She looks exactly the same, smiles exactly the same. The warmth in her eyes seems real. It always seemed real. And that's the thing that nearly broke him the first time. She approaches him at the welcoming banquet, friendly, curious, offering small talk like they haven't met before, like she hasn't already decided how this ends. Yuri keeps his face completely neutral. He gives her nothing. Not rudeness. Rudeness would be noticed, would be a diplomatic incident. He gives her pleasant, careful blankness. He answers what she asks, doesn't volunteer more, and moves on. Inside, the wound is very much still there. But he isn't 18 and in love anymore. He's a man who has already lived through what she does, and he is not doing it again. Jorge, meanwhile, is running his own test. During a formal greeting, he channels a pulse of mana. Subtle, controlled. The kind of thing a lesser-trained observer wouldn't notice. He's checking Yuri's response. How does this little prince react to power pressure? Yuri doesn't flinch. His soul separation is already sitting quietly in the back of his awareness like a compass needle, and Jorge's probe hits it and slides off. Jorge notices. He files it away and smiles. Then he manufactures a scene. It's during one of the formal evening events. Emma, Yuri's maid, is serving refreshments in the reception hall. Jorge moves. The collision is deliberate. Wine goes everywhere. Across Jorge's sleeve, across his chest. The entire room freezes. Jorge doesn't yell. That would be too crude. He turns slowly, looks at Emma with an expression of absolute, patient contempt, and tells the room that in the Empire, a servant who publicly embarrasses a member of the royal family faces immediate execution. He says it conversationally, like it's just information. Then he asks, very politely, if Betrayal's court would accommodate the standard. Emma goes white. Yuri steps forward. He doesn't reach for a weapon. He doesn't raise his voice. He looks at Jorge directly and says that if the Empire requires a penalty, he will assume Emma's place. Trial by combat. His champion against Jorge's, right here, decided properly. Jorge smiles. He likes this. He names his fighter immediately. One of his elite guards, a trained military duelist. The implication is obvious. This is a public execution, dressed up as a fair fight. The third prince loses, Brielle is humiliated, Emma dies anyway, and the Empire gets to stand there looking magnanimous about the whole thing. The court watches in horror. King Fiore's expression doesn't change, but his hand tightens on the arm of his throne. Yuri volunteers himself as his own champion. Jorge's fighter is bigger, more experienced by reputation, armed with standard military technique. He comes in confident and controlled. Yuri doesn't fight him the way a 13-year-old should. He doesn't try to outstrength him. He moves, flows, using the soul separation to read the fighter's weight shifts and blade angles before they fully commit. He's been in 1,000 fights in a life this body hasn't lived yet, and it shows in the way he positions himself, the way he doesn't waste motion, the way he closes distance at exactly the right instant and ends it. Quick, clean, decisive, Jorge's fighter is on the floor. The room is silent. Jorge looks at Yuri with something new in his eyes. Not anger, interest. Genuine, calibrated interest. He notes it, inclines his head with perfect diplomatic courtesy, and lets the matter drop. Emma is shaking. Yuri puts a hand on her shoulder, squeezes once, and tells her to go get some water. He watches Jorge walk away and thinks, "You're still coming. I know exactly when. But you just saw something you weren't supposed to see, and that's going to make things complicated later. Worth it." Now for the other half of the board. The same night as the trial by combat, before the dust has even settled, Yuri slips away from the palace and goes to work on a completely different front. Because building a kingdom's defense isn't only about swords and mana techniques. It's about money, information, and the people who operate in the spaces the court pretends don't exist. First stop, Goryo, a loan shark operating out of the lower city. Sharp, suspicious, ruthless about repayment. Yuri walks in, sits across from him, and borrows a significant amount of funds. Not with a royal title as collateral. That would create paper trails and court scrutiny. He uses a legitimate but obscure legal mechanism and walks out with the money and Goryo's very careful attention. Second stop, a merchant named A. The name is a joke. She picked it herself because, she says, when you're at the bottom, at least you're alphabetically first. She's running a business that's barely surviving. Smart woman, wrong timing, wrong connections. Yuri has future knowledge of which industries are about to explode and which supply routes are about to open, and he dumps a chunk of Goryo's money into her operation with specific instructions. She thinks he's insane. She takes the investment anyway because the alternative is bankruptcy. Within a few years, A is going to become one of the most connected merchants on the continent. Yuri doesn't need to tell her that. He just needs to plant the seed. Third stop, Asana. She's a young girl, blue hair, sharp eyes, the kind of stillness that comes from growing up in places where being noticed is dangerous. She's in debt. The debt isn't hers, and the reason it isn't hers is sitting in a hospital bed, a sick sister who needs ongoing treatment that Asana can't afford. She's one bad week away from being sold to cover the cost. Yuri pays the treatment debt. He doesn't make her sign a contract. He doesn't call in a favor. He looks at her directly and says, "You have skills the palace can use, and you don't have to spend them for people who'd burn you when you're no longer useful." Asana stares at him for a long time. Then she nods. She'll become his shadow, his personal scout, assassin, intelligence network compressed into one person. She's not that yet. Right now she's a girl who's been shown, for maybe the first time, that not every door has a trap behind it. One night, 3 separate operations. Yuri goes back to the palace before dawn and sleeps for 4 hours. Then the 5-year time skip hits. Age 18. Yuri stands in a courtyard, and he is not the same body he woke up in 5 years ago. He's been under the sword demon's training every day, reinforcing the soul separation technique, building the physical base that his technique demands. He's lean, composed, moves with the economy of someone who doesn't waste anything. The world hasn't stood still either. Across the eastern border, the orc situation has been escalating. 3 great tribes are moving together. Unusual, historically. Orcs don't unite easily. Something is driving them, and the allied nations, Brielle, Ged, Balzac, and the Holy Kingdom, are organizing a joint campaign to push back. Yuri knows what this campaign turns into in the original timeline. He knows the ambush points. He knows which commanders get overconfident, which supply lines collapse, which tactical decision becomes the catastrophic one. And he knows that if Brielle sits this out, as the Senate desperately wants, the kingdom gets no credit, no allies, and no early warning when the real invasion comes. He volunteers Briel's forces himself. The Senate is horrified. His father approves. They march east. First stop on the route, Count Sidor's border territory. And here is where Yuri's team gets their first genuine taste of what this campaign is actually about. Sidor is an old commander, weathered, pragmatic, the kind of man who has watched enough young soldiers die to have no patience for romanticism about war. He runs his border the way he runs everything, efficient, brutal, honest. When Yuri's contingent arrives, Sidor pulls the young recruits together and walks them through something the palace never would have authorized: captured orcs. Live ones. Not for show, not for interrogation. Sidor forces the soldiers to observe and participate in the reality of what they're marching toward. The size of an orc. The toughness of the hide. What it actually takes to kill one versus what the training manuals say it takes. It's not comfortable. Several recruits look unwell. Nobody quits. Yuri watches quietly. He's already been through the real version, but he watches his soldiers go through this calibration and thinks, good. Better here than in the canyon. They move into the region of Ged, Holy Kingdom territory. And here Yuri meets Princess Sylvia. Morning comes cold and clear. Ragna calls the full command staff together before dawn. Not a planning meeting, a final briefing. The assault on Okua's fortress is today. The window is now. Every day they wait is another night of sacrifices feeding the ritual, and every night of ritual is Okua getting harder to reach through the compounding layers of dark magic fortifying both his physical position and his tribal binding. The plan is straightforward in structure and brutal in execution. 3 coordinated assault vectors hit the outer walls simultaneously. Brusen's heavy infantry on the left flank, the Holy Army's disciplined formation on the right, Ragna's Imperial contingent driving the center. Yuri's unit takes the forward point of the center push. Again. Vanguard again. He wouldn't have it any other way. The difference between this assault and every previous engagement in the campaign is scale. The orc forces defending Okua's fortress aren't a forward unit or a scouting contingent or a patrol line. They're the gathered strength of 3 unified tribes at full mobilization. The outer walls are lined with orc archers. The gate approach is packed with orc Valk units in staggered defensive rows. Behind the walls, the dark magic the ritual has been generating sits over the fortress like weather, visible to anyone with mana sensitivity, pressing down on the battlefield before contact is even made. Yuri can feel it through the soul separation. The technique reads the atmosphere the way it reads intent. Not precisely, not with specific data, but with a directional sense that something massive and wrong is present and building. He catalogs it, doesn't fight it yet, saves that processing for when he needs it. The signal goes up. The assault begins. The Allied forces hit the outer walls from 3 directions in the same minute. The sound of it is enormous. Not just the combat, but the architectural response. The fortress designed to channel defenders to specific points, and Ragna's plan specifically designed to split that channeling across too many points simultaneously. Yuri's unit punches through the outer gate approach with the hunter gem knowledge running hot. Every orc in the defensive line gets assessed in real time, the weak points identified, the most efficient angles calculated, and Laurent and Jared executing on those angles with the kind of precision that comes from training under a man who's been doing this in some form for 20 years. The gate comes down, not dramatically, practically. The structural weak points Yuri identified using the seismic daggers get hit in sequence, and the gate's reinforcing mechanism fails before the orc defenders can reposition to compensate. Briel's unit is inside the outer wall before the defenders have fully processed the breach. The inner fortress is different. Closer quarters, tighter corridors between the internal structures, the ritual architecture creating actual spatial distortions that make navigation inconsistent. Distances feel wrong, directions drift slightly. It's not an illusion in the way Kurui's magic was an illusion. It's a genuine structural effect of the dark magic that's been running here for months, warping the local environment the way extreme heat warps the air above a road. Yuri navigates by the soul separation exclusively, ignoring his eyes in the distorted sections and trusting the technique's ambient perception to keep him on a true line toward the ritual's source. His unit follows him by following him. They've learned to read when he's operating on senses they don't have and trust the outputs. The orc Valks inside are a different caliber from anything the campaign has fielded before. These are the personal guard of a king, warriors who've been running in the dark magic environment for months and have absorbed residual enhancement from the ongoing ritual. They're faster than standard Valks. Their wounds close more quickly. The first one Yuri engages takes 3 hits that would have ended a normal orc fight and keeps coming. He adjusts. The hunter gems identify the specific enhancement pattern, where the dark magic is concentrating in the Valk's body, which points are amplified and which are consequently less defended. He hits the undefended points instead. The Valk goes down on the 4th strike. Laurent and Jared are doing the same assessment in real time, adapting their approaches, the unit moving through the inner fortress in a fighting advance that's slower than the outer wall breach but methodical and sustainable. The sound of the assault outside tells Yuri that Ragna's center push has engaged the main orc force in the outer fortress yard, which means the bulk of the defensive force is occupied, which means the path to the ritual chamber is as clear as it's going to get. He moves faster. The ritual chamber is at the fortress's core, not underground, elevated. A tower structure at the center of the inner ward. The architectural logic being that the sacrifice ritual requires line of sight to the sky for the binding mechanism to function. The dark magic has been going skyward from this point for months, which is why the foreigner could describe the ritual's existence from continent-level observation. The stairs up are guarded by something Yuri wasn't fully expecting. Not orc Valks, not warriors at all. 3 orc shamans, ritual practitioners, the specific magic users who've been maintaining the day-to-day operation of the binding ritual under Okua's direction. They're not physically imposing. What they have instead is the accumulated charge of months of sacrifice channeled through them, and when they deploy it, it doesn't present as a combat technique. It presents as gravity. The pressure that hits Yuri at the base of the stairs is physical, a concentrated dark magic compression that pushes downward, adds weight to every movement, makes each step cost 3 times what it should. Laurent tries to follow and stops, unable to advance under the load. Jared pushes 2 steps further before his knees go. Yuri pushes through because he doesn't have a better option, and because the soul separation gives him something the shaman's pressure doesn't account for. The technique doesn't fight the compression, it finds the current within it. The natural lines of least resistance the way water finds a path, and Yuri follows those lines upward, even when every other direction is closed. Step by step, each one a transaction. He's spending physical reserves he rebuilt over the last day and a half of recovery, and he can feel exactly how fast they're depleting. He reaches the first shaman and the combat there is short. The shamans are ritual practitioners, not fighters. Their power is enormous in its specific context and nearly useless in a knife-range exchange with someone who can read their intention before they commit to it. 1, 2, 3. The soul separation maps each one before they act, and Yuri is already finishing as they start. The pressure drops. Laurent and Jared come up the stairs fast. The chamber door is ahead, and behind it, Yuri can feel the full weight of what's been running in this fortress for months. He pushes the door. Okua. The Orc King is not what the campaign's intelligence described. The descriptions were of a large, powerful orc commander with dark magic capability. Accurate as far as they go, the way describing a storm as some wind and rain is accurate as far as it goes. What Yuri walks into is something that has been saturated with months of ritual power, that has been feeding on human sacrifice in a sustained and systematic way, that is physically larger than the orc Valks by a margin that should be impossible, given what orc biology is supposed to cap at. The dark magic hasn't just empowered Okua, it's been rebuilding him. His eyes have the specific wrong quality of someone who's been running corrupted power through themselves long enough that the corruption has become structural. He looks at Yuri, and the expression isn't anger or contempt, it's the flat assessment of something very large, deciding whether a small thing constitutes a threat. Then Yuri steps fully into the chamber, and Okua apparently decides yes, and the fight begins. The first strike is a test. Okua moves with speed that shouldn't exist at his size. The dark magic is managing his mass, redistributing it dynamically, the way a conventional warrior manages their weight in a stance. Yuri reads the weight shift a half-second early and moves, but the displacement from the near miss is enough to push him sideways 3 steps. The power behind the strike hasn't landed, and it's already done that much. He reassesses immediately. The Hunter Gem data on standard orc vulnerability points doesn't fully apply here. Okua's ritual enhancement has built secondary structures around those points, deliberately, the way a military fortification builds outer walls specifically because it knows where attackers will aim. Hitting the standard weak points will take longer than Yuri has stamina for, The soul separation is running at full sensitivity, painting every surface of the chamber in ambient information. Okua's movement patterns, the ritual channels, the physical infrastructure the dark magic runs through, the specific points where the binding mechanism connects Okua to the sacrifice power he's accumulated. If the channel points can be disrupted, the enhancement weakens. Not instantly, not completely, but incrementally, and each increment matters. Yuri changes his targeting. He stops going for Okua's body. He starts going for the ritual infrastructure. The channels are partially physical, built into the floor of the chamber in carved stone, and partially energetic, the mana-equivalent threads that connect Okua to the accumulated sacrifice. Yuri's blades aren't optimized for cutting mana, but the soul separation can infuse guilty with enough directional force to disrupt the energetic components if he hits the right angles. He starts hitting the floor. Okua is confused by this for exactly 2 seconds before he understands what's happening, and then he stops testing and commits to ending the fight fast. The assault that follows is the hardest thing Yuri has been through in this body. Okua is fully mobilized, dark magic enhanced, and aware that the time pressure is now on his side. He needs to kill Yuri before enough channels are disrupted to matter. His strikes are enormous, fast, and relentless. Yuri is blocking what he can and moving away from what he can't block and fitting in channel strikes in the gaps, and the gaps are narrow and getting narrower. He takes 2 solid hits. Not glancing, solid. His body handles them because the soul separation has been building his physical resilience for 5 years, and because he's been hit by things this hard before. Not often, but enough to have a response trained in. He doesn't go down. He keeps his feet, which is itself an achievement at this power differential. Laurent tries to intervene. Okua swats him aside without looking, which tells Yuri both that Laurent is not seriously injured, Okua didn't commit to the strike, and that Okua has correctly assessed that Yuri is the only person in the room who constitutes a genuine threat to the ritual. Good. That means Okua's attention is where Yuri needs it. He uses that. Draws Okua forward with a committed attack line that looks like a desperate push for the body. The kind of obvious move a fighter makes when they're running out of options. And when Okua commits to the counter, Yuri redirects at the last possible instant and drives guilty into the largest remaining channel point in the chamber floor. The soul cut. Not a slash, not a technique in the conventional sense, a direct extension of will through the blade into the target, the founder's method pushed to its current limit, everything Yuri has distilled from 5 years of cultivation and 2 lives of combat compressed into a single instant of intent. The channel shatters. The effect on Okua is not immediate collapse. It's not dramatic in the way a final blow is dramatic. It's a cascade. The largest channel gone. The remaining ones redistributing load they weren't built to carry. The enhancement framework developing fractures under the strain. Okua's physical output drops, visibly, measurably, the way a fire drops when the largest log breaks. Yuri hits him twice more, both times at the remaining channel points, both times with everything the soul separation can focus. The second channel breaks. Okua's regeneration stops working. The third hit is for the wound itself. Yuri drives in low, inside Okua's reach where the mass differential matters least, and puts the blade where the Adelvine hunter knowledge says to put it against a dark magic-enhanced orc with a disrupted ritual framework. Okua goes down. Not quietly. Not quickly. The Orc King goes down the way anything that large and that powerful goes down, with a sound like structural failure, like something enormous collapsing under its own weight. The dark magic fracturing outward from the disrupted channels in a shockwave that blows Yuri off his feet and into the chamber wall. He hits the wall, slides, ends up on the floor with stars in his vision and a sound like ocean waves in both ears. He stays there for a moment, takes inventory. Everything seems to still be attached. Jared appears in his field of vision, expression doing something complicated between concern and relief. Laurent is already at Okua's position confirming the outcome. From outside the chamber, through the walls, through the tower, across the entire fortress, Yuri can hear the sound of the battle changing. The orc forces in the outer yard, going from organized defense to something else. The specific acoustic quality of a coordinated force losing its center. The tribal binding is breaking. With Okua down and the ritual disrupted, the 3-tribe coalition is fracturing along every ancient seam that the dark magic was papering over. The orc forces outside aren't retreating, they're fragmenting, falling back into tribal unit behavior, the unified front dissolving into three separate groups with three separate priorities that are suddenly no longer aligned. Ragnar's forces, Brusen's infantry, and the Holy Army are pressing a coordinated assault against a defense that is no longer coordinated. The math changes completely. The foreigner is somewhere in that outer battle. Yuri can't see him, but the specific quality of the gap that opens in the orc defensive line, there and then not there, suggests he's been working his way through it in the most direct manner available to someone of his capability. Yuri pulls himself up, uses the wall, gets vertical. He looks at Okua's body and thinks about the tower, about the memory projection, about humans who became something else because of one person's choices, and about how far that process goes, and whether anything about reversing it survived in the Adelvine records, or whether that knowledge is genuinely lost. He'll look into it, after. Right now there's a campaign to finish closing out, and a political situation that is about to get extremely complicated because an Imperial Supreme Commander just openly betrayed his Emperor's orders to complete this victory, and the Emperor is going to have responses to that, and Brielle is going to be sitting in the middle of the continental political fallout with whatever position Yuri has managed to build. He sheathes guilty, walks to the window. The Allied forces are routing the fragmented orc response. Clean, methodical, exactly as Ragnar's revised plan described. The fortress is falling. Yuri watches for a moment. Then he turns and walks back down the stairs, because there's work to do, and standing at windows looking at victories is for people who have time to spend. The fortress falls by midday, not fully occupied. The orc forces that fragment and flee into the surrounding territory will need weeks of mopping up operations, and the tribal question of what happens now with three suddenly separated orc factions is a political problem that will outlast the campaign itself. But the fortress is taken. The ritual is ended. Okua is dead. The Allied commanders gather in the fortress's outer yard in the afternoon. There's a quality of exhaustion in the gathering that's different from the exhaustion after smaller engagements. The specific depletion of people who've been running on sustained high stakes for weeks and have finally hit the moment where the immediate emergency has resolved. Ragnar looks at Yuri across the gathering, with the expression of a man revising an assessment upward for the third time in a campaign, and finding the revision keeps landing higher than expected. Sylvia stands with the Holy Army's remaining officers. She catches Yuri's eye briefly. Neither of them acknowledges the arrangement directly. It exists. It's functional. That's enough for now. The foreigner is at the edge of the gathering, watching everything with the mild expression of someone who found the whole operation mildly interesting. He looks at Yuri, looks at guilty at Yuri's hip, and nods once. The same slow, confirming nod as after the Hunter Gem demonstration. A running acknowledgement of a trajectory he's decided to keep watching. Graham stands with the Imperial contingent that followed Ragnar's lead in the betrayal of the Emperor's order. He looks like a man who's made a very significant decision and is processing the full weight of it. He meets Yuri's eyes and Yuri nods at him. Not thanks, not acknowledgement of a debt, just recognition. You made a choice. I see it. Laurent and Jared are nearby. Laurent is sitting on a piece of fallen outer wall with his armor off, examining a wound on his side with the detached attention of someone determining whether it needs a healer or just time. Jared is standing, apparently fine, which tracks with every previous indication that Jared's physical resilience is approaching a category that normal injury assessment doesn't fully apply to. Hernando appears at Yuri's shoulder. He doesn't say anything immediately. He reads the situation, reads Yuri, does the calculation he's always doing. Then, the Emperor isn't going to like any of this. No, Yuri agrees. Ragnar's position becomes very complicated. He knows. And your position. Also complicated, Yuri says. In useful ways. Hernando looks at him. Then, quietly, your fate still won't resolve. I tried again this morning. It's still completely blank. Yuri thinks about a 28-year-old man dying on a floor with Lauren's sword in his chest and nothing left to show for his life. Then he thinks about where he's standing right now. Good, he says. The afternoon winds down. The medical teams work through the fortress. The supply lines start reorganizing for the return march. The political implications of the campaign's outcome begin their slow spread across the continent like ink in water. The Emperor's betrayal order failed. His supreme commander turned against him. 3 orc tribes are suddenly leaderless. The allied nations survived something they weren't supposed to survive. And somewhere in the background, the Devil's Tome is still unlocated, and the foreigner is still searching for whoever he came across the ocean to find. Yuri sits in the medical tent that evening while a healer works on the damage from the Okua fight. His body has been through the full accounting now. The worm assault, the shaman pressure climb, the chamber fight, and the total is significant. Not crippling, significant. He stares at the tent ceiling and runs through the threads. Trina is still out there, still unpunished. Still operating with the full backing of an empire that attempted a betrayal on this campaign and failed. The window for what she represents, the manipulation, the intelligence extraction, the catastrophe of his first life that she was central to enabling, hasn't closed. It's shifted. She's going to come at him differently in the next phase, through political channels rather than romantic ones, and he needs to be positioned for that. The Senate dukes who tried to strip his mana method are still in Brielle's court, still resentful, and a successful campaign doesn't eliminate political enemies. It sometimes amplifies them, because successful people draw more opposition than failing ones. Got Barber is back in Brielle somewhere, presumably on the better trajectory Yuri redirected him toward. He'll need to check that. Confirm it's holding. The orc question is larger than the campaign resolved. 3 fractured tribes, ancient grievances, the knowledge from the Adelvine Tower about what the orcs actually are and what that implies about the continent's history. That's a thread that goes somewhere and Yuri doesn't yet know where. And Okua's fortress now stands taken, which means the Empire, the allied nations, and whatever orc faction emerges from the tribal fragmentation all have a position to negotiate from. And the negotiation is going to happen on a continent that just watched a dead-year-old prince from a small kingdom help take down an orc king, while an imperial supreme commander committed outright treason against his own emperor. Yuri is not going to be able to operate quietly anymore. He's been building toward this first major visible win for 5 years, and it's landed exactly as hard as he needed it to. And the cost of that is that everyone on the continent now has him in their awareness as something to account for. He files all of it, assigns each thread a priority, notes the ones that need immediate action on the return march, and the ones that can wait until Brielle is in sight. Then he closes his eyes and actually sleeps, which is something he hasn't done properly in longer than he'd want to admit. Outside the tent, the Allied camp settles into the specific quiet of forces that have finished something enormous and haven't yet started processing what comes next. Torches burning, sentries moving their routes, the fortress dark against a clear sky. Inside the fortress walls, somewhere in the ritual chamber, the carved channel points in the floor are cold, for the first time in months. Whatever Okua was building toward, the full realization of the unified orc coalition, the dark magic framework scaled to continental war, has stopped, interrupted. Not undone, not reversed, but stopped at this particular point on a timeline that was heading somewhere much worse. Yuri bought the continent time it didn't know it needed. He doesn't think of it in those terms. He thinks of it in terms of the specific list of things that still need doing, and the specific people who are still in danger, and the specific mistakes he made in his first life that he is not going to repeat. But somewhere in the deep part of him, the part that woke up crying in a 13-year-old body because he saw his father and his maid alive and thought he was in hell, something that has been pulled very tight for 5 years releases by a fraction. Just a fraction. There's too much left for more than that. But a fraction is real. And Yuri Bole, third prince of Brielle, regressor, reluctant architect of a second chance he didn't ask for and couldn't waste, takes it. The return march takes 2 weeks. 2 weeks of moving a battered, victorious, politically complicated allied force back through terrain that 2 months ago was active war zone. The orc fragments that scattered after Okua's fall are still out there, not organized, not dangerous at campaign scale, but present in the way that anything dangerous and leaderless is present. Unpredictable. Yuri's unit runs the perimeter sweeps and handles the contact situations, which serves 2 purposes. It keeps his soldiers sharp on the march home, and it keeps Brielle's contingent visibly useful to the Alliance, until the final handshake at the border. Ragna rides alongside Yuri for a portion of the second day. Not officially, there's no formal joint march arrangement. He simply adjusts his position in the column until he's riding at the same pace as Yuri, which is the Ragna equivalent of scheduling a meeting. The conversation covers the political landscape with the brisk efficiency of 2 people who are both very clear-eyed about what just happened and what it means. The Emperor is going to respond to Ragna's defection. Not immediately. The optics of moving against his own supreme commander in the wake of a successful campaign that the Emperor publicly positioned as imperial-backed are complicated. He'll need time to build a narrative. But the response is coming, and Ragna is operating without the protective buffer of imperial authority for the first time in his career. He isn't panicking about it, he's calculating it. The difference between Ragna in distress and Ragna running calculations is essentially invisible from the outside, which is part of what makes him so effective and so dangerous. What he wants from this conversation is a read on Briel's posture in the coming continental realignment. Specifically, where does Yuri stand on the question of Ragna's future positioning, given that Ragna just burned his relationship with the Emperor to complete a campaign that kept Briel alive? Yuri considers this carefully. He owes Ragna a straight answer. He tells Ragna that Briel's interests and Ragna's personal interests overlap significantly in the near term, and that Yuri intends to honor obligations that are actually owed. He's not committing to a full political alliance. That requires his father and the proper apparatus of the kingdom and conversations Yuri is not positioned to have unilaterally in a field on a return march. But he's telling Ragna clearly that the debt of the campaign intelligence, of the commitment to the final push, of choosing to end the fight correctly instead of retreating to imperial safety, that debt is real, and Yuri accounts for real debts. Ragna nods, files it, rides on. Sylvia's conversation happens differently. At a camp on the fifth night, informal, sitting near a fire with the specific kind of tiredness that only settles in after the immediate stakes have dropped. She asks Yuri a direct question. Does he actually know what he's doing with the orc origin information from the tower, or is he carrying it without a plan? Yuri looks at the fire. Honest answer? He has the beginning of a plan, not the full shape. The Adelvine records suggest reversal is theoretically possible. The practical path from theoretical possibility to actual reversal at meaningful scale involves understanding the dark magic's specific mechanism at a depth Yuri doesn't have yet, finding the Devil's Tome before whoever else is looking for it, and solving the political problem of what you do with 3 fractured orc tribes on a continent that has spent generations treating orcs as monsters to be eliminated. None of that is fast, none of it is simple, but Yuri is not in the habit of dropping threads just because they're long. Sylvia listens to this. Then she says, her kingdom has archives, old ones. Records from before the current political map that most of the continent doesn't know exist, because the Holy Kingdom's archivists have been collecting historical documentation for purposes their current leadership doesn't pay close attention to. If the Adelvine history connects to anything older, it might connect to something in those archives. She's offering access. Not loudly, not with conditions attached beyond the existing fake dating arrangement. Just, it exists, and now he knows it exists. Yuri files it as one of the more valuable pieces of intelligence he's received in months. Tells her so. She looks slightly surprised that he said it that way, plainly, without diplomatic packaging, and then looks like she's filing something about him in return. The march continues. Graham falls in beside Yuri on day 8. The Imperial Knight who made his choice at the campaign's end has been quiet through the return. Processing, Yuri suspects the full weight of what defying an Emperor's order actually means for a career, a family, an entire life structure built on service to a specific institution. Yuri doesn't open with reassurance. He opens with a question. What does Graham actually want now that the structure he was operating within has cracked? Graham thinks about it for a long time. Long enough that Yuri doesn't push. Eventually, Graham says, he wants the thing he came here for in the first place. He became a knight because he believed in a specific idea of what a knight was for. He spent a decade watching the institution drift from that idea. The campaign, specifically watching Briel's unit operate, watching Yuri make the decisions he made and stand behind them in the way he did, reminded him what the original idea felt like. Yuri nods. Doesn't make an offer explicitly, but he tells Graham that Briel has room for people who operate on that framework and that the door isn't closed. Graham rides back to the Imperial contingent, but he rides back looking like a man who has a direction rather than a man who's lost one, which is a meaningful difference. Corey finds Yuri on day 10. The half-orc translator has been invaluable through the campaign, and almost invisible, exactly what a translator in a military operation needs to be. He shows up at the edge of Yuri's camp spot looking uncertain, in the specific way that people who've spent their whole lives being treated as problems look when they're about to ask for something. He wants to know if the offer Yuri made earlier, about living among humans, about the court mage Hernando, and the magic apprenticeship possibility, still stands. Now that the campaign is ending, now that there's no immediate operational reason to keep a half-orc around, Yuri tells him yes, without qualification. Hernando confirmed months ago that Corey's aptitude for structured magic is genuine, and a student with that aptitude and Corey's specific background, someone who exists between the human and orc worlds, might be exactly the kind of person who could eventually work on the reversal problem that Yuri is carrying. He doesn't say that last part. Too much, too soon, too much pressure on a relationship that needs room to grow at its own pace. He just says yes, the offer stands, and they'll work out the details when the column reaches Brielle's border. Corey nods. His expression does something that takes a moment to identify as relief, so complete it's almost physical. On the 12th day, the column passes back through Count Sidor's border territory. Sidor comes out to meet them, inspects the returning force with the detached professional assessment of a man who's seen enough campaigns to read the quality of what comes back. He looks at Brielle's contingent specifically, looks at Yuri. The assessment takes about 30 seconds. He says nothing. He just nods. Once. With the specific weight that old soldiers put into nods when the words would be too much effort. That nod means more to Yuri than most of the formal commendations he's going to receive in Brielle's court. The border of Brielle's territory comes into sight on day 14. The soldiers in Yuri's unit see it, and something in their bearing changes. Not relaxation exactly, more like a long-held tension completing its cycle. These are men and women who left wondering if they'd see home again, and are now seeing it. Yuri rides at the front and lets himself look at the skyline for a moment. The hills of Brielle, the specific color of the sky above them, the distant outline of the capital that he watched burn in his first life, and that is currently very much intact. He keeps his expression neutral, but inside the part of him that carries the weight of the original timeline, something quiet and significant is acknowledged. They made it back. The homecoming in the capital is larger than Yuri anticipated. Word travels fast in kingdoms anticipating news of their armies, and the word that preceded the column was good. Okua is dead. The Allied campaign succeeded. Brielle's third prince distinguished himself at every phase. The crowds that line the capital's approach roads are real, not arranged. People who were waiting to find out if their soldiers were coming home, and finding out the answer is yes. Yuri rides through it with the appropriate composure. He acknowledges the crowd, presents the return correctly, does none of the things that would make this moment about him personally. The soldiers around him get the attention. Laurent and Jared and the unit that actually held the line and followed him into rooms they had every reason to not walk into, they get the moment. King Fiore meets them in the palace courtyard. The reunion between a king and his son returning from a successful campaign should be formal. Proper distance, official acknowledgement, the public performance of royal dignity. Fiore manages approximately 4 seconds of this before something in his composure cracks very slightly, and he puts his hand on Yuri's shoulder with the grip of a man who spent 2 months quietly terrified that the child he's watched transform into something remarkable was going to be taken from him by a war on the other side of the continent. Yuri stands still and lets his father hold that grip for as long as he needs. He thinks about the version of this meeting that didn't happen in his first life. The version where Fiore disappeared during the invasion and Yuri never got to find out what his father's face looked like when he was genuinely relieved. He is finding out now. It looks like this. The formal debriefing happens the following day. Yuri presents the campaign to Fiore and the court, with complete accuracy and careful framing. The political implications of Ragna's defection, the current status of the 3 orc tribes, the intelligence from the Adelvine Tower, the relationship with the foreigner, and what that relationship might mean going forward. He doesn't present everything he knows. He presents everything the court needs to know to make good decisions in the immediate term. The Senate dukes who tried to strip his mana method 6 years ago sit in the council chamber and listen to the third prince brief the king on a campaign he personally shaped the outcome of. Their expressions vary, none of them look comfortable. Yuri doesn't look at them. He addresses his father and the relevant advisors and lets the duke's discomfort exist without engaging it. Their time is coming. Not today. Today is for establishing the post-campaign position cleanly. Hernando presents his own assessment afterward. The Grand Sorcerer's read on the continental political landscape, the Empire's likely next moves, the opportunity structure that the campaign's success has created for Brielle in terms of alliances and leverage. It's thorough and precise and delivered with the casual authority of a man who has been quietly thinking about all of this since before the march began. Fiore listens to both of them. Then he looks at Yuri and asks one question. What does Yuri recommend as Brielle's primary strategic focus for the next 2 years? Yuri answers without hesitation. Three things. First, formalize the relationship with the Holy Kingdom before the Empire can insert itself into that gap. Sylvia's position gives Brielle a direct line to an ally that the Emperor will want to peel away. Second, the Adelvine Tower information needs expert analysis beyond what Yuri and Hernando can provide in the field, which means finding the scholars who can work with it and giving them the resources to do so. Third, prepare for the Emperor's response to the campaign's outcome, because it's coming, and the form it takes will be political before it's military, and Brielle needs to be positioned on the political terrain before that response arrives. Fiore nods through all three. At the end, he looks at his son for a moment with an expression that isn't quite readable, something between pride and something older and more complicated, the expression of a parent watching a child they've been getting to know all over again. He says, "Approved on all three. Get started." Emma finds Yuri that evening in the garden. Not formally, she's been hovering in the way she does when she has something to say and is timing the approach. She sits down across from him and asks, directly, whether he's all right. Not physically, actually all right. Yuri considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. The real answer is complicated. He's carrying the weight of an original timeline that only he remembers. The cost of the decisions he made in this campaign, the knowledge that every person around him is alive because of choices that required specific kinds of ruthlessness he doesn't regret but doesn't forget either. He's also sitting in a garden in a kingdom that isn't Ash, with his maid alive in front of him, on a path that is genuinely different from the one that ended on a floor with a sword in his chest. He tells her, "Getting there." Emma looks at him with the specific intelligence she's always had, the sharp attentiveness that court positions train out of most servants and that Yuri has never once been able to fool. She says, "You've been carrying something very heavy for a very long time." He doesn't confirm or deny, he doesn't need to. She says, "You don't have to carry all of it alone." He thinks about all the people he's been carefully positioning, all the alliances he's been building piece by piece, all the support structures he's been assembling, with the precision of someone who knows exactly how badly things go when the structure isn't there. He thinks about Hernando and Jared and Laurent and Sylvia and Graham and Asana and even Corey, each of them placed where they are because Yuri thought ahead. But Emma's point isn't about logistics, it's about the other weight, the personal one. He nods. Once. Meaning, "I hear you." She nods back. Meaning, "Good enough for now." A week into the homecoming, Asana reappears. She's been operating independently through the campaign period. Yuri gave her a framework and she ran with it, and the intelligence network she's been building in his absence is more developed than he expected. She presents her report with the flat efficiency of someone who's been waiting for the debrief and wants to get it right. The network has coverage on 4 major cities, including 2 in Imperial territory. She has contacts in 3 separate guilds and an information exchange relationship with 2 other independent operators who don't know they're working adjacent to a prince's intelligence asset. The information quality is high. The operational security is better than Yuri could have structured himself with the time he had. He looks at the report, looks at her. She's been doing this for months on her own judgment, and the result is substantially better than the assignment warranted. He tells her this is excellent work. Asana looks at him with the expression of someone who hasn't heard that phrase directed at them very often and isn't entirely sure how to file it. Then she nods, businesslike, and asks what the next assignment is. Yuri gives her 3 targets. The first is ongoing Imperial court movement, specifically anyone in proximity to the Emperor who's been tasked with the post-campaign narrative management. The second is the location of anyone who might have information on the Devil's Tome. The third is Got Barber's current status and activities. Yuri wants to know how the trajectory redirect has been holding. Asana takes the list and leaves. Efficient, clean. Exactly what he built toward. Jared catches Yuri in the training yard on the 9th day back. Not for conversation. Jared is not a conversation person by inclination. He's there because he's been training since approximately the morning after they got home, and he wants a sparring partner who will actually push him. Yuri obliges. The session is long and completely unsentimental. 2 people who respect each other's capabilities working them as hard as possible in a controlled environment. Jared has grown enormously through the campaign. The prodigy who Yuri pulled off a wall at the Night Academy has become something that the continent's power measurements are going to need to account for before long. The gap between them has been closing in ways that Yuri tracks carefully. Not out of concern for his own position, but because a Jared who can match him is a Jared who can handle threats Yuri can't always be present for. By the end of the session, Both of them are breathing hard. Jared looks satisfied. Yuri looks like he's already thinking about what comes next. He is. Because the political response from the Emperor arrives on day 12 of the homecoming, faster than Yuri expected, and in a form he didn't fully predict. Not military. Not even directly political. It arrives as a social invitation. The Emperor of the opposing empire formally invites the royal families of the allied nations, including Brielle, to an imperial reception, celebrating the campaign's success, honoring the joint effort. Framed entirely as magnanimous acknowledgement of a shared victory rather than what it actually is. A controlled environment the Emperor is designing to reassert dominance over the narrative, reassert his authority over Ragna through public mechanisms, and, critically, to put Trina in the same room as Yuri on imperial ground with imperial rules. Yuri reads the invitation 3 times, then he reads it again looking for the specific tells in the phrasing. They're all there. The Emperor is good at this. Very good. The invitation is a trap constructed entirely of pleasantries, and it will look like a trap to nobody who doesn't already know that it is one. Hernando comes in while Yuri is reading it, takes one look at his face and sits down. Imperial reception? Imperial reception. Are we going? Yuri sets the invitation down. The question isn't whether to go. Declining is its own kind of losing move, a signal of weakness or fear that the Emperor will use. The question is how to go, what position to walk in with, what the goals are, and how to walk out with more than the Emperor planned to give up. He thinks about Trina, about walking into a room where she'll be positioned to approach him, where the Emperor will have controlled the social architecture to funnel him toward her, about what it means to face the person who destroyed his first life on her home ground with her family's full institutional weight behind her. He's not afraid of her. He's aware of her in the specific way that a person is aware of something that already hurt them as badly as it's possible to be hurt. Not paralyzed by it, not consumed by it, just precise about the reality. He thinks about Sylvia, about the fake dating arrangement that exists specifically to close the political window Trina represents, about how that arrangement plays in an imperial reception where the Emperor is expecting to use Trina as leverage. He thinks about the foreigner, who is somewhere on the continent and whose relationship with Yuri is not formal enough to extend an invitation to a royal reception, but whose presence in the peripheral background of continental politics constitutes a factor the Emperor will not have fully calculated. He thinks about all of it, all the pieces he's been moving for 5 years, and the new pieces the campaign generated, and the threads that are still unresolved, and the ones that are about to become urgent. And then he does what he's always done. He starts building the plan. We're going, he tells Hernando, but we're not going as a small kingdom attending an imperial event. We're going as a kingdom that just helped end an orc campaign the Emperor tried to sabotage. We're going as the party that walks in with Sylvia as an official diplomatic companion, with the foreigner's visible acknowledgement of Yuri's capability on the public record, and with Ragna's defection as a demonstrated consequence for people who underestimate what Brielle is building. Hernando listens to this. His expression does the thing where he's running calculations very fast. You want to turn an imperial reception meant to diminish you into a public demonstration of continental relevance. I want to turn it into a room where the Emperor has to acknowledge what Brielle did in that campaign in front of every political observer on the continent, Yuri says. And while he's doing that, I want to find out where the Devil's Tome is, confirm Ragna's position, and make sure Trina doesn't get within 30 seconds of a private conversation with anyone on my side. Hernando looks at him for a long moment. You know this is going to be extraordinarily complicated. Everything worth doing is... Hernando picks up a pen and pulls a piece of paper toward him. When do we leave? 3 weeks. I need Asana's updated intelligence, Sylvia's confirmation on the diplomatic companion arrangement, and 1 conversation with the foreigner before I walk into an imperial court. And your father? Yuri thinks about King Fiore, about the grip on his shoulder in the courtyard, about the approved on all 3 and the complicated expression that followed it. He'll understand the move, Yuri says. He's one of the 10 strongest people on the continent. He knows what this game looks like. Hernando nods, starts writing. Outside the window, the capital is going about its business. The specific, ordinary life of a city that survived something it wasn't supposed to survive, that doesn't fully know how close it came to not surviving, that is currently operating in the extended grace period that Yuri has been quietly constructing for 5 years. Merchants and guards and families and students at the night academy where Jared used to sleep against walls and a court mage's new apprentice who used to live between two worlds and now has somewhere to be. Yuri looks at it for a moment. Then he turns back to the map on the table and gets to work. Because the Emperor's invitation is only the surface of what's coming. Somewhere beneath it, in the same currents that brought the Empire's betrayal order, and Okua's ritual, and the Devil's Tome warning, and every other moving piece on this board, something larger is building. Yuri can feel it the way he feels intent through the soul separation. Not specific, not precise, directional. The first war is over. Whatever comes next is already in motion. And Yuri Bole, who died once with nothing left, who woke up small and weak in a childhood bedroom and decided to rebuild everything from scratch, is not going to be caught unprepared for it. Not this time. Not ever again.